So, one of the things, and one of the big criticisms of certainly like the Tory Eurosceptics, of people like JRM, Daniel Hannan, all the rest of these people, is they've been banging on about leaving the EU all this time, and yet they've had presented no plan whatsoever for a reasonable or anything like that. There was no roadmap presented at the referendum either. Now, finally, it looks like that the European Research Group, led by JRM, has finally decided he's going to release one, just in time for conference season, because he wants to push this over the Chequers plan. And remember, people want this guy to be Prime Minister. As I've said, this guy doesn't give a crap about working class or middle class people. He doesn't give a crap about you. And this plan he's got proves it. You know, so the headline is Tory Eurosceptics plan for Brexit, a new force to defend the Falklands. How does that help people in the UK? How does this help people who are in full-time jobs yet still have to receive housing benefits or rely on food banks? Or people who can't get a job, or people who are facing a health crisis and are, because there aren't enough places for social care in their area. There's so many more, things in this country that are problems this does not address. So, a draft plan for Brexit was proposed by Tory Eurosceptics. It includes significant tax cuts. Yes, because cutting your government budget, taking money away from the government so that they can provide for social programs is a really good idea, guys. So, as well as more eyebrow-raising ideas, such as a new military expeditionary force to defend the Falklands and a domestic-built missile defence system, according to a leaked version. How does that help your average person in the UK? It doesn't at all. So, just as I've said, as we go through this, remember what I said at the beginning. This is from, JRM, Jacob Rees-Mogg, who runs this group of Tories, and people say this guy should be the next Prime Minister. He doesn't give a damn about you. So the document from the European Research Group, or the ERG, which corrals the bulk of the hard Brexit supporting Conservative MPs, also argues for so-called invisible customs frontier on the Irish border, with any checks carried out away from the frontier. The technology, as we've discussed in the past for this, does not exist. It's a sci-fi fantasy that this exists. So after extracts of the leak were carried by several of the Sunday newspapers, the EGR's head, Conservative MP Jacob Rees-Mogg, said it was an early draft, mainly focused on assuring worries about how an exit could see the UK reliant on the WTO, that the World Trade Organization, terms. Amid the confronted effort by the ERG and allied groups to derail Theresa May's Chequers plan, the group's counter-proposals are intended to refute the charge that Tory Eurosceptics have no coherent ideas of their own. And given what we just heard, that's not a really coherent idea, putting some new mobile defence force to the Falklands. How does that help your average Joe on the street who has been made poorer by Brexit? So, as expected, the report leaked version would see the UK propose a Canadian-style trade deal with the EU, with none of the alignment or common rules proposed by Chequers. So here's the thing: even if they want this deal, that Canada-style deal, it will not happen. If you look at the Canada deal itself, Canada has said that it will accept rules and regulations of goods going into Europe that they will not push anything that does not respect those rules or regulations and regulatory alignment. Now, we've said this from the very beginning. These guys basically don't want any regulatory alignment. That was and always has been their big cry about Europe. All these rules and regulations, they somehow stop us from trading. It doesn't. It makes products safer, and that are sent safe to pass on and to sail to the general public. Why is that a bad thing? So anyway, it continues. So a no-deal Brexit would mean an estimated £39 billion final payment to Brussels would instead be largely used for the NHS, which would be a one-off payment. So basically, the NHS gets a one-off payment of £39 billion. Congratulations, that's less than the budget they receive now. That goes to solve no problems in the NHS. The NHS might get a little bump from it, but in the long run, it's nothing. This is why I talk about why a lot of these MPs don't look long-term and planning. Long-term planning for our government doesn't seem to be a thing, which is really worrying. Where are we? Yes, and it was said to be largely used for the NHS. The document argues that another Brexit bonus would come from cuts to income and capital gains tax. How does that help your average person on the street? Once again, you are taking money that could go into the government to spend on social housing, social care, welfare. Remember, one of the biggest things that people miss about, especially when it comes to welfare spending, it doesn't go to something like universal credit. That's not the biggest expenditure of welfare spending. The biggest portion of welfare spending is people's pensions. That is the biggest piece of welfare spending we have. So whenever someone tells you, oh, it's these people draining, the welfare thing, congratulations, it's not the people who are jobless doing all that, wasting, public money. It's the old people. People don't like to talk about that because all of a sudden, maybe, we should start applying some of those cuts to the old people. Now, I don't want to, but if you look at their ideology, why does their ideology not go to cutting, pensions and, especially social care for the elderly, which is the biggest portion of the welfare spending budget? Because the old people are more likely to vote Tory. And as we saw last time from the whole last election, the big the fuel rebate that old people got, which Theresa May wanted to get rid of, lost her a ton of votes. So, just goes to show you these people don't give a damn about the worst off and most affected in our society. And that's bad. And yet, again, as people said, people want this guy to be Prime Minister. So, the other bonuses, so capital gains tax, business rates, and stamp duty. That doesn't help your average Joe on the street at all. And business rates, by the way, they don't go, or most of the business rates don't go to the government. I might have got that wrong. Don't go to the government themselves. They actually go to your local council, so that your local council can then pay for things like rubbish collection and things like that. This is what happened to the recent council that had just gone bust. It lowered its business rates because it was a Tory-controlled council, thinking, this will be great, this is the pattern for the rest of the country. Whoops, we've gone bust. So, anyway, it continues. Less expected was the plan to create a rapid reaction military expeditionary force to allow swift deployment to protect places such as the Falklands Islands. We've already said That doesn't help anyone. There is also proposal for a defence planning to include the insurance of a nuclear missile shield to deter aggression, the Mail on Sunday said, an idea that's seemingly based on the US Strategic Defence Initiative known as Star Wars. So we're basically going back to the 80s with Margaret Thatcher. And in fact, most of these people are Thatcherites, who are the hard Brexiteers, and as we've said, in fact, it's covered before in... let me get it out. In the Great Brexit Swindle, I think we've gone through this, the whole finishing Margaret Thatcher's regulation. But Margaret Thatcher wasn't in total favour of deregulation. You know, she was one of the prime people who had help set up the single market. The exact thing that a lot of these guys now want to leave. So the bulk of scrutiny of any final EGR plan is likely to focus on plans to prevent a hard Irish border after Brexit. The leaked report gives a few details beyond the idea of carrying out checks away from the border. Rees-Mogg told the Mail that it was an early draft. The key thing which the papers will address is that there is nothing to be concerned about the UK trading the EU on WTO terms, and yet there is. We've already discussed this several times in other videos. So... And the idea is these things will be more expensive. Trading with them on WTO terms is more expensive. We've already discussed that the average tariff that the EU has on products is roughly around 3%. That is their average tariff rate. And yet, apparently, that's a problem. Of course, we know why. They want to do zero tariffs. Once again, as we've said, replicating the whole, British Empire at its height. You know, we now have a rapid response force that can be deployed anywhere in the world. That doesn't sound like gunboat diplomacy at all, does it? So, on Tuesday, Rees-Mogg is due to speak at an event arguing for the economic benefits of a no-deal Brexit, and is organised by the Economists for a Free Trade group, which has repeatedly argued that the UK economy would thrive on WTO terms. The UK, he said, has nothing to fear from trading on WTO terms. Let Brexit mean Brexit, and let's flourish on the upper aspects of the WTO, he added. No one's accepted our tariffs. No one's accepted our schedule for goods. We have no agreement with the WTO. And once again, the WTO is not a really good thing. There is no country that exclusively trades solely on WTO terms. So, I look forward to this when this comes out fully, because there are going to be so many people just tearing it apart and saying this is unfeasible. That's just completely... I mean, the whole Irish border plan of replacing it with technology, the technology doesn't even exist. So how can you say you're going to implement something when the technology doesn't even exist? That's complete work of fantasy. And the whole thing of a rapid response force, that's got nothing to do with Brexit. That doesn't make any sense. But here we are in this, So you thought Chequers was dead on arrival. At least Chequers had a plan of what it was going to do, of how we were going to sort and lessen the impact of... leaving the European Union. This plan by the ERM has basically just said, we're just going to do it on steroids. And we've done videos in the past why the WTO isn't good, so go check those out. But once again, here we are. People got on at me when I said that Brexiteers were fantasising about restoring the empire. What's this guy doing? He is doing 0% tariffs, which you can't really do, especially under the most favoured nation. If you do 0% tariffs, you have to do that for everyone. How then do our own businesses survive? You know, bang goes all British manufacturing because it's far cheaper to import it than make it here in the UK. There will be no manufacturing of any time because it will just be cheaper just to import something from India. That's hundreds of thousands of jobs gone. You know, British businesses will not be able to compete, so they will have to then move to these other countries, probably in Africa, to make those products and then ship them back over and then sell them in the UK. You know, one of the things I have said, particularly in my area in South Yorkshire, is there are very few actual good jobs available to people where they can earn a good wage and make a decent living and be able to feed themselves and their family and have a decent house. But we're not. We are in a situation which has been caused not by our membership of the EU, and I want to stress that. All these problems we face in the UK at the moment, none of them, not one, has been caused by the EU. It has been caused by the UK's own domestic policies put in place by this government and previous governments. You do not solve the problems of the UK by leaving the European Union. You make them worse.